There we go. Okay, perfect. So level 3, I kind of want to start with poll everywhere, and that means that I'm going to have to probably log into it from the other page. We'll see if it lets me. I haven't done poll everywhere through PowerPoint Live before, so the recording's gonna be a lot of fun for people because they're gonna see me scrambling. But think about your answer as I am getting set up here. No, that's not what I want. All right, I think I've activated it. We'll see if it happens on the slide. If not, I will change which screen I am sharing. Okay, it's not going to. So we're going to change which screen I am sharing. All right, we are over here on this other screen now. So if you could go to pollev.com/my name, I will put that in the chat for you so that you can easily get to it. It will give you this question. Of course, that didn't turn into a link, but so let me know if you have trouble getting to it. Okay, good. We've got responses coming in. Okay, great. Right, and there's 20 of you, which is fantastic. We'll wait just another second. We'll switch over to the responses. Okay, experienced. Okay. I'm seeing experience come up a lot, and that is true. That is definitely a big part of it. Okay. Mentor, I like that that's coming up. That's going to be important later on. Right. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lock that because I think we've got the idea, right? We know that it's meaning that you've been around a while, that you are ready to kind of step up a little bit and mentor your um, fellow tutors, especially those level 1 folks who are just now joining us. All right, I am going to get us back to our PowerPoint. And I will skip ahead here. Maybe. There. There we go. Okay, the next question I have for you, and we can use the chat, or you can unmute yourselves as you feel comfortable, is to ask you if you've seen this diagram before. Like, what is it? Why do you think it's important? Why do you think it applies to tutoring or SI? So, what is this thing? Have you seen it before? If you have, tell us a little bit more. Okay, Angelina's saying yes, she's seen it before. Can you give me some more context? Like, where have you seen it, or what do you think it connects with? Okay, Cassandra has not, and that's totally fine. Okay, Sage is saying yes. I think Sage. Okay, Anthony, yeah. Yes, hierarchy of questioning. Right, exactly. So Bloom's taxonomy is old. I will say that. It's been around in the educational world for a while, but it has to do with kind of like levels of learning, right? When we learn something new, we're kind of down in that remembering stage, right? We're just kind of like getting facts, recalling them. But as we learn more or we kind of grow in confidence in a different subject, we move up in the little pyramid in the taxonomy, with mastery being kind of at the creating stage, right? So that's where we can take a theory, take an idea, and create something new, or we can design something in there. What we want to try and do is kind of in line with what Anthony's talking about there, is we want to help students move up in the taxonomy, right? We want to help them reach the next level, because a lot of the time their exams or the things that their professors are testing them on are going to be up in the evaluating category, on finals, midterms, that type of thing. So great work. The next question that I have for you is related to growth mindset. So I'll turn this around to you all again. What does growth mindset mean to you? So you can put that in the chat or you can unmute. What does growth mindset mean to you? Or if you've never heard of it, that's a valid thing to say as well. Yeah, Cassandra, go ahead.
I think what growth mindset means to me is being fluid in your understanding and in facilitating another student's academic success. So not being fixed. I mean, like, well, that's on the picture, but that's my understanding of the growth mindset. Just kind of being fluid and building on things and kind of going with whatever direction there needs to be. There doesn't need to be like a stringent teaching method, just kind of working with the student and communicating.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'm going to kind of read out some of the things in the chat because I know sometimes, depending on your device, seeing the chat and seeing the screen at the same time can kind of be difficult. So Samantha said, trying to overcome mental barriers. Morgan said, to strive for constant learning and evolving. Daniel mentioned knowing that when you make a mistake, you can learn and grow. Learn from it and grow. Vanessa said that you are understanding and willing to learn and grow as a person/tutor. Angelina said not being afraid of making a mistake, someone who is always open to learning and trying. And then Ashley said not looking at my mistakes as failures, but understanding they are normal and part of the learning process. Okay, great. I think you all have like a general understanding of what that is. We're going to watch a short video, and you're probably going to have to tell me if you can hear or not. I apologize for some of the tech things. I was hoping to have this on a big screen in the office, but we made the adjustment. I don't think you would have wanted to be on the second floor without the air conditioning. I can just tell you that right now. But let me know if you can hear this. Do we have sound? Could you hear it?
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it. Okay, I will probably have to reshare my screen. Include computer sound. There we go. Okay. I will restart it. And some of you, if you've taken GEL, which I think a few of you have taken GEL, you're probably familiar with this and you might have seen this video or a similar video in that class.
Researcher and professor Carol Dweck uses the term mindset to describe the way people think about ability and talent. Dweck delineates between two different mindsets that exist on a continuum. The first is the fixed mindset, which suggests that your abilities are innate and unchangeable. The second is a growth mindset, which views it as something you can improve through practice. In a fixed mindset, you view failure as permanent, but with a growth mindset, you see failure as a chance to learn and even pivot. Those with a fixed mindset are more likely to view critical feedback as a personal attack, while those with a growth mindset will see it as a chance to improve, where they can develop new systems. With a fixed mindset, you're more likely to choose easier tasks and put in minimal effort. After all, if talent is fixed, why bother improving? Why even try? But with the growth mindset, you're more likely to embrace challenging tasks and work hard to improve. Those with a fixed mindset are likely to give up when they face an obstacle. Meanwhile, those with a growth mindset will view obstacles as a chance to experiment and solve problems. In a fixed mindset, the focus is on measurable accomplishments. But with a growth mindset, the focus is more on a journey of continual improvement. With a fixed mindset, you're less likely to take creative risks. But with a growth mindset, creative risks are simply a way to innovate and improve. Ultimately, your mindset influences everything from creative risk taking to how you view feedback to whether or not you finish difficult tasks. And in the end, it's one of the greatest factors in determining whether or not you grow and improve in your abilities.
All right. So let's talk about this. So you've seen the video, you already had some great thoughts on this. Um, as we're thinking about this within the context of the work that we do or as students, why does mindset matter in general as a student? We'll start with that. Why does mindset matter for students? What are your thoughts there? Again, you can either, unmute or put that in the chat.
Well, students constantly have to overcome like new hurdles, whether it's school and balancing family and work and all those things. They have to be very flexible, and it comes down to like their mental ability to overcome challenges.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. There's always challenges popping up as students that you have to kind of get through. And if you have a fixed mindset, right, that might make it difficult for you to overcome some of those barriers that you face. It might make you more likely to just give up sometimes. Yeah. Okay. Anthony said if you believe you can't grow, then you probably won't try. Yeah, great points. Cassandra mentions that fixed mindset is limiting. Yeah, anybody else? Why would this matter as a student? Like, think with the student hat on first, since you are all students. And if you need to, think about some of the things that were mentioned in the video. Okay, Ashley said because as a student, you're sometimes going to fail. Yes, absolutely. I will say, since many of you are STEM tutors, STEM is tough. I mean, STEM is tough for everybody. So you're going to find something that you're going to see as difficult if you're a STEM major, for sure. And then Vanessa said, if they aren't in the headspace to learn or have a positive mindset regarding their assignment, it's going to be hard to get them involved and make the session one that is productive. I think that that's a good transition into the context of our work in LTS, that second question that we've got on the screen there. So let's start with the positives, right? We don't want to dwell on all the negatives. What does it look like if you're having a session with a student who has a growth mindset? What might that look like? So again, your student in the session has a growth mindset. What are some things that you might see or be able to do in that session? Okay, Morgan said willing to engage, learn, and apply what they've discussed with you. Yeah. Yeah, they're answering your questions, right? They're not just saying, I don't know, constantly. I think some of us might have had some of those sessions where you get the student that just is very frustrated and says, I don't know, constantly. Okay. What else might that look like? And not just like the speaking part, right? You can also think about body language and that type of thing. Okay, Samantha said asking questions and unafraid to say that they don't understand something or they need more help. Yeah, so they're engaging with you. They're also asking questions. The way they say that they don't understand is more of a, I don't understand, so I want to get an answer rather than it coming from a place of frustration. Body language wise, what would it maybe look like if a student has a growth mindset coming into a session? Okay, enthusiasm, hopeful eyes, relaxed shoulders. Yeah, sitting upright, eye contact. And keep in mind that these are just general things, right? Everybody has their different personality, and they might be just having a bad day at the time. Questions and hydrated. Okay, there you go. That they're taking care of themselves. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's kind of flip it. Let's talk about what it might look like or feel like. Let's start with look like if a student in a session has a more fixed mindset. What does that look like? How can you kind of tell that that might be the case? Chat or unmuting, either way. Okay, saying things like, I can't learn this. Always saying they're a failure. Okay. More unsure of what the problem is. Okay. Monosyllables. Oh, yeah. Like the hood up in the hoodie. Yeah. Okay. Saying that something is too hard. Okay. Yeah, Sharik, that's a great point. Saying I'm not a math person, especially if the student is maybe a humanities or social sciences major and they're really struggling with their required math and science courses. They've got the idea that like I'm going to major in the humanities so that I don't have to do math. Or on the flip side, for the writing center folks, you've got your STEM student coming in saying, "Well, I'm a STEM major, so I because I can't write, right? Like I chose to do this because I'm not good at writing." Or like Cassandra said, I suck at writing. Yeah, so these might be some of the phrases that we encounter from a student if they have more of a fixed mindset. Okay, so we've talked about fixed mindset and growth mindset. Obviously, it's easier to learn something with a growth mindset, right? Because you're open to that. But let's talk a little bit about metacognition. I've got some things on the screen that we'll discuss in a second, but have you heard of metacognition before? And if so, what is that in your own words? What is metacognition? How would you describe it? And then I'll go through the stuff that I've got on here. And if you've never heard of metacognition, that's okay too. Okay, kind of like a self-meditation on your own actions and processes. I like that definition. Does anybody else have other definitions that they might use? Okay, thinking about thinking. Absolutely. Yeah. So what I've got on the screen here is kind of related to a workshop that Trevor offered a couple of semesters ago related to metacognition. So it's thinking about thinking. Right? It's analyzing your thinking processes, being aware of how your brain works in a way. It's also helpful for studying, right? Using metacognitive strategies are going to help you, as you can see here, study smarter, not harder. So you're not spending as much time because you know what works better for you. So it's figuring out what and how to study. So as we think back to the conversation we just had about mindset, who might be better equipped to use metacognitive strategies? Someone with a fixed mindset or someone with a growth mindset? Pretty straightforward, but what do you think? Who's going to be better able to analyze their thought processes? Okay, got a couple votes for growth mindset. Yes, I would agree. So one of the things we might want to do is help students get that growth mindset with our questioning, with our encouraging, right? Things that you learned in previous trainings about being positive, about like everybody can do this, right? Like No, you don't suck at math. You're very capable of doing this, so that they can then use those metacognitive strategies. Okay. So let's think about metacognitive strategies. What are the benefits of using them? Well, it's going to give you a way to assess and improve the way that you learn and help you gauge your progress and see what you do and don't know. I don't know about you, but if you've ever taken a new class or learned a new thing and you're like, I really don't get this, sometimes the way we're studying or the way we're trying to take in the information is not working for us. If we keep trying to do the same process over and over when it's not working, we're spending a lot of time and just getting frustrated, right? And I think sometimes also this may have happened to you where you've taken a test, you thought you studied really well, you spent a lot of time on it, you take the test, and then you get the grade back and you either didn't pass or you got a much lower grade than you thought, right? Metacognitive strategies are going to help you assess so that the next time you take the test, you will do better. You'll know how to, fill in those gaps. And it's kind of like a recursive type of situation here, right? We know that people with a growth mindset may be better equipped or more easily able to employ metacognitive strategies. But on the flip side, as you use those metacognitive strategies, it's going to help you develop a growth mindset. So if you've got a student in a session with you and you're noticing this person seems like they might be more on the fixed mindset side of that spectrum that they talked about in the video, helping them use some metacognitive strategies could help them develop a growth mindset. So let's talk a little bit about what those strategies might be. So again, these are just some examples. Some of these I found online and some of these are from Trevor's presentation that he offered. And I'll go ahead and read these just because I know that that's helpful. So some examples, not an exhaustive list, would include journaling, skimming the textbook, reading the abstract of a long article, right? If you've got to use an academic journal article in your class, reading it and comparing it to what you already know before you dive into the full long article. Writing questions before you begin reading or before you start the practice problems, drawing a picture or a model of something, creating a study guide, making a KWL chart, which is a know, wonder, learn chart while you are studying, reviewing your notes after a class, and reflecting after an exam. So you get the exam back, looking at it and saying, okay, what things did I do well? What things could I do better next time? And this is related to either your study strategies or what topics you did well on or what types of problems you did well on in the exam. Before I get to the what they all have in common question, are there any of these strategies that you are already using yourself as a student? Let us know. Which things are you already doing?
For me personally, I like to like write questions prior to either like reading something or like if there's like a science particular topic on science, like I would write questions that I think would be on the test.
Awesome. That sounds like it's super helpful for you. Yeah. Anybody else? What are some things that you do? Okay. Samantha said journaling, creating a study guide. Okay. Reflecting. Cassandra, what about you?
Yeah, me too. I agree with writing questions. I also like to, when I'm reading like a journal article or something, I do read the abstract and then I read the introduction and the conclusion and then each subheading. Same goes with a book. Some people don't read the chapters, but I love reading the chapters because it kind of gives you a direction of where that's going. And that way you don't have to read the entire thing. You can kind of pick out what information you need and what you need to learn more about in order to complete whatever assignment you're doing.
All right. And then I see Daniel mentioned drawing pictures as another way to kind of use some of these practices. Yeah. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but are there any of these things here that you've either used in a tutoring session or suggested that someone in a tutoring session start doing? Are there any that you've recommended in that context in previous semesters?
For me personally, I'm not much of a drawer, but I was working with a student and I couldn't get them to learn a specific topic. And I started drawing pictures for them and they learned it instantly. So then I just recommended to them, like, oh, it seems like you have trouble like reading the concepts. Whereas if you draw out like the process, for example, of like glycogenesis, you'll be able to remember it better. And so they started drawing after that.
Awesome. I'm glad that that worked for them. I'll use another similar example that I can think of on the writing side of things. So I have taught English as a second language for a while. That's kind of my background. And I had a couple of engineering students who were really struggling with some advanced grammar. And they were really good at math, but the grammar was throwing them. So I taught them some like formulas to remember the different verb conjugations. So they wrote down the formulas of it that was just like verb one, verb two, and that seemed to work for them to think of it as a formula rather than like, oh, these complicated sentences that they had to remember. So that's excellent. Anybody else? Is there anything that you've done in a session or recommended a student do on their own, either from this list or something that you think might be related?
I can go.
Sure.
Um, so most of my students are computer science. So if I'm like looking at all these examples of how to practice metacognition, the one that most applies is drawing pictures because we deal with a lot of like abstract ideas where we're creating a bunch of different structures. They're called data structures. So I like to draw out what the data structure should look like, and it helps to like visualize the idea and like put it into code, especially with the different like algorithms we're working with. And a lot of my students don't like drawing at all. So I'm like, I don't even give it, I don't give them the choice. It's like, if you want to do it, you got to draw. It just helps out so much. So that's how
Awesome.
I, yeah.
Yeah, and I think an interesting thing there that you did, Daniel, that is part of why you're a level three tutor. You've had all the training, is you were kind of able to see where the student was in the learning process, right? That they weren't to a certain point and that they needed to see it in order to move forward. So as level three tutors, I think you have some of that insight that your colleagues may not have yet, and you'll be able to share that with the other tutors that work with you. All right. So we've talked about these. We've talked about what you've used personally or what you've used in sessions. As you're thinking about these, what do all of these strategies or practices have in common? What's a common thread for all of them? And it's not a trick question. It's also not a super difficult question. What do you think they all have in common? You can just throw out guesses if you want to.
They all require metacognition.
That's true. Yes, absolutely. You're right. Yeah. And Samantha, or sorry, Cassandra said cultivating a methodology that works for you. Okay. Is actually even more simple than that. Anybody else have some other guesses? Self-improvement? Yeah, that's true. All of these strategies force you to interact with the material. So you're being forced to actually look at the textbook or look at the lecture notes or look at the PowerPoint slides. These things are making you engage with the course content so that hopefully you can remember it and, move up Bloom's taxonomy a little bit there. All right. So what would that maybe look like? We've talked about this a little bit, but as you're thinking about your space, right? You tutor different things. Writing center people are working on something different than STEM might be working on. Here's some examples of strategies in practice. So if you've got students coming in ahead of an exam, and I think that that's often the case for STEM, right? Especially I'm thinking Math 101 and Math 105 when you've got the exam prep sessions. Here's some examples of things that they can do. You could suggest that they write down everything that they remember. So if you've got a student coming in and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm stressed about this test, I don't know what to do, you could be like, okay, well, let's just write down everything you can think of that's been covered in class so far. And then from there, you could ask them to get out the textbook Or again, if it's a class that you kind of know the test pretty well, for those classes that give pretty much the same test, you can compare that to what you know is on the test and be like, ah, okay, I see that you don't have much information about this topic. So that might be something that you want to review. You can also have them prioritize, right? So order what's important to review, either what you don't know, so things that you know you need to study more, or what's a big part of the exam. When we're thinking about our work in LTS, the big part of the exam, that information, we can get that in a variety of ways. Area one might be the professor might have said in class, this is really important, or this is a big part of the exam, right? The instructor might explicitly say that. You might know because you've taken the class from that professor, or it might be one of those things where you're familiar with what the test structure is and you know a big section of the test is on that topic. Or the third way that you might be able to figure that out with the student is that it's something that the professor has mentioned a lot or has taken up a lot of time in class. Creating a one-pager is another way to study. Some of you, I think Samantha mentioned that she makes a study guide. So making a study guide or encouraging them to make a one-pager of what they think is important. Practice problems are also another thing to do. There might be some in the book, but you might want to either help them create practice problems, or you might know of resources online. I will pause and say Chegg is hit or miss, right? And professors' opinions of Chegg is also hit or miss. We shouldn't be uploading things to Chegg. That's against the academic honesty policy. But there are websites out there that do have practice problems. Quizlet has some on there, right? Directing them to places where they can get additional practice problems if that's something that they need. And then the last thing that I think I was guilty of not doing, but I think many students also don't do, is after the exam, looking at what went well and didn't and making a plan for the next test. So if you've got a student that's coming in who is very anxious about an exam that's coming up, you might encourage them to come back in after the test is over and discuss with you what went well. And then you can maybe help them figure out the areas that they should study for the next exam. So you can maybe see like, oh, okay, this topic or this strategy is something that you might want to give more attention before the next exam comes up. Because sometimes they may not be able to see that for themselves. When it comes to note taking, so this is kind of switching more to the humanities and the writing center, suggesting that maybe before class they look at the materials ahead of time so that they're kind of priming their brain a little bit, looking on Canvas for any notes. During class, actively taking notes. Now, I don't have a lot of information there because personally, I think note taking is a very individualized thing. What works for you may not work for somebody else. I would encourage you to encourage the student to handwrite notes. I know that we are trying to be environmentally conscious, not waste paper and all of that. But for some reason, our brains just have not evolved yet where typing saves the information as well as physically writing does. If they have a tablet, that will still do that. But for some reason, we're just not to the point where typing is going to stick as well. So that's just one suggestion. After class, writing a summary of what you remember. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the curve of forgetting, right? When we first learn something, we've got it, and then over time we kind of lose it. But if we review it a little bit at a time, we don't lose as much of that information. And then later while they're studying, having them review their notes quickly or go back and look at things. So if you can encourage them to use those practices as you're talking to them in a session, this is just some examples of what to do. But I'd also encourage you to practice these on your own to see what works and what doesn't, because I think you as students sometimes have better insight than I do as a pro staff member, because it's been 10 years since I got my master's degree. I've been out of school for a while. Sometimes I may not have like the first thing that comes to mind, but you're studying all the time, right? You're trying to keep your GPA up. You've got strategies that you can say like, oh yeah, I do this, and explain it to them, and also share with your colleagues. Yeah, Cassandra said summarizing after class is something I need to practice more personally. Yeah, I completely understand that. All right, next question that I have for you. I know I've talked to you a lot. What about learning styles? Have you heard about learning styles? Is this something that you've heard thrown around before? You just give me a yes or a no. Got some head nods. Yes, okay. Thumbs up. Yeah, okay. When you hear learning styles, what do you think of or what comes to mind? Or what are the categories that you think of? Okay, everybody learns in their own way. Okay. Note taking. Okay. Okay.
Some are visual learners, some are
Auditory.
yeah, auditory learners.
Yep. And Samantha threw it in the chat. The audio, yeah, the auditory, the visual, kinesthetic. Okay, this is something we've heard of, right? It might have been something that's covered in some of your classes. It might have been something that's been covered for you in a previous LTS training. Okay, what we're going to do now is go back to Poll Everywhere. I believe that it is unlocked. I'd like you to put in whether you think this is true or false. Everyone has a set learning style, which is how they best learn. I'm not going to switch over to the results because I don't want it to impact your answer as we're going through here. All right, about half of you have done it. I'll give you another second because I know sometimes getting back into Poll Everywhere can be tough, especially if you've only got one device that you're using. You another like 30 seconds or so. All right, I'm going to show the responses. So top one's true, bottom one's false. And let's see how you did. So the answer is false, believe it or not. There have been more research studies done that have shown that the idea of learning styles, meaning that you can only learn this way, is actually not true. So you might have had teachers, right, that were trying to give you a bunch of different activities you could do in high school because they were told in their teacher training that they needed to provide those because some students are visual learners, some students are auditory learners, etc. But that's not true. However, let me see if I can get out of this. Come on, slides. There we go. No? All right. Give me just a second. I'm probably going to have to stop sharing and resharing. And I got to get back to Teams. I apologize for the tech stuff. There we go. All right. So we know that there is not a learning style that's set for you, right? But we wouldn't be talking about it if it didn't apply in a way. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about is the shift to learning preferences. You might have already done this, this questionnaire, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat for you. And I apologize for how big the font is. The font is gigantic because that's what I have on the PowerPoint slide. What I'd like you to do is take the next 5 minutes. Feel free to turn your camera off if you need to, and fill out this questionnaire. This is something that is going to see your learning preferences. So take the assessment about yourself and remember what your score is because you're going to report back on that. So we will come back at 11:14.
External server error. Oh, yeah. I guess I'm not the only one.
Oh no, it's giving you a service error. Okay, give me just a second. I will get you a new link. I will be very sad. Oh no. Okay, so sometime between last week and this week, the website went down. That is very, very frustrating. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do instead. All right. We are going to do this the old-fashioned way instead of doing it with the link. I promise you I tested the link last week and it worked just fine. So instead, I will go ahead and put this link into the chat for you, which is a PDF version. So what you'll do here is choose A, B, C, or D for each question on the first 2 pages. And then on the final page, it will give you a chance to score. All right. Um, yeah, that's fine. I was gonna just ask you if you needed more time. Um, if you've already finished, you can use the scoring chart to tally up your amount, but we'll give you a few more minutes to keep working. Yeah, no problem. It's a lot easier on the form because you can just kind of click and keep going. Once you've answered all 16 questions, what you'll do next is you will use whatever your answers were for those to check the scoring chart. It's got like what 1A would be, what 1B would be, what 1C would be. Tally up how many V's, how many A's, how many R's, and how many K's that you got on there. And when you're finished, I was going to do another poll everywhere, but for sake of time, because I want to make sure we've got time to discuss, once you have your top results, so whatever your top score was, go ahead and put that in the chat. If you got more than one that had the same score, you can go ahead and list both of those. But which area did you score the highest in? Interesting. Okay, we've got a lot of kinesthetic popping up. One visual. That's fine, Sheree. Take your time. If you've already finished and you put your answer in the chat, start thinking about why you think that is. Like connected to your life, your major. Why do you think that might be your highest score? And then we'll share that out in a little bit, just to give everybody time to finish. Interesting. Okay, another visual. I'm noticing some patterns, but I'll wait before I make any broad assumptions here. Okay, more visual. Interesting. All right, so if you've already got your score, if you've answered, go ahead and put in the chat why you think, like what about your life, your previous learning experiences in your major, your hobbies, right? Why do you think that is the highest thing for you? What could be a contributing factor? Why do you think your score is what it is, just based on your life and previous educational experiences? And there's no wrong answer. It's just like, what do you think about yourself? While you're doing that, I will share my screen again. Oh, okay, what does each one stand for? So V is for visual, A is for oral, so that's like listening and speaking. R is for reading and writing, and K is for kinesthetic, so that means like actually physically doing something. That can be like, I would say that would include drawing something, like drawing a model of something, or maybe actually doing a demonstration, or in the context of a writing center situation, like the scenario-based tutoring practice that we do. I would count that as kinesthetic also. Okay, Samantha, it mentions that sometimes she follows what people are saying. That makes sense. That completely understands. Sage mentioned that seeing a demonstration of how to do something helps with viewing it in context. Okay. All right. Shriek said both kinesthetic and oral. Interesting. Okay. Anybody else? Like, why do you think your score might be what it is? Okay, Daniel said, I got K and I've always been someone to talk through things on a whiteboard. Yeah, so like even though you're talking about it, you're physically doing something on the whiteboard. So again, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just feel like there's some overlap with like visual and reading and then writing and kinesthetic. So is there like a definition that we could use to differentiate?
If the website were working, which I'm hoping they fix it, they had pretty good separations, but I really think you're right. There is a lot of overlap between those. And I think that the thing to keep in mind is that since these are preferences, right? They're preferences and not set styles. These are just going to be guides for helping you study more efficiently, potentially. right? So for example, if you've got a professor who only does PowerPoint slides and they only do lectures, and you're forced to just kind of sit there in class and listen and look at the screen or the board the whole time, right? And you find that you're more of a kinesthetic, your preference is more for kinesthetic. That does not mean that you can't learn from that instructor. It just means that in your own studying, it might be good for you to, like what was mentioned, maybe draw a model or do some practice problems if you find that you're more of a kinesthetic learner. So that's kind of why I wanted you to see, like, what is your preference? And it's entirely possible that students coming into your space for tutoring in the same major might also have that same learning preference. So that might be important to bring up. The next thing I kind of want to talk about is connecting these learning preferences to metacognitive strategies. So if we think about kinesthetic, since many of you mentioned that you got highest in kinesthetic, which of these metacognitive practices do you think might be helpful for somebody who has a kinesthetic learning preference? What are some things that they could maybe do to enhance their learning and studying? Okay, drawing pictures, absolutely.
For like biology and chemistry, there's all kinds of cool like like objects you can build.
Oh yeah, like building the models of like the cell structure, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, flowcharts and diagrams, absolutely. All right, so let's think about, again, this is going to be more aimed at STEM, but let's imagine that you've got a literature and writing major who is coming in and their strength is in the reading and writing, but they're really struggling with their required math and science classes that they have to take for general education. What are some of the metacognitive practices that you would recommend to them with reading and writing as their strongest preference? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute, whatever you want to do. So again, you've got somebody with a reading and writing preference that's kind of struggling with a subject. What would you suggest that they do for studying? Writing questions, that's a great one. Yeah, so writing down the questions that they have. A KWL chart might be a good way to do that. What else would maybe be good for them? Skimming the textbook. Yeah, so skimming ahead of time, good. Let's switch it. If we've got somebody that does a lot or that feels like their learning preference is like the oral, so the listening and speaking, and they're taking an asynchronous online course this semester, what would be some suggestions you would have for them if their coursework is primarily reading, writing, but their learning preference is speaking and listening? It may not be on the screen. It may be something that you have to think it out. Okay. Cassandra suggests talking it out. All right.
I always recommend either writing down or saying like the actual terms to describe what you're using in math, just to get in like the process. And if you use it, that you're like more familiar and you're able to identify it in the future.
Okay, yeah, like talking out things or writing it down. Daniel mentioned office hours. Absolutely. Go to office hours and have the conversation with your instructor. So even if the class is asynchronous, they still have to offer office hours. Like that still is a thing that they have to do. Yes, and YouTube, absolutely. YouTube and Khan Academy are great because they're videos, right? They can hear the information. And if they want to do more with speaking, they can use the read aloud feature, or they can come in for tutoring and just talk at you, right? Sometimes that's all they need is just be like, this is what I think this theory means, or this is what I think my professor's asking me to do, and just having you either confirm or point out where they might be missing things out there. Okay, good. I think that that is a good summary of how we can kind of connect those things. We only have 5 minutes left together. I want to make sure that you have enough time for your lunch break. But let's kind of talk about the third question that I've got on the screen here, because we've kind of talked about the first two already. How could we suggest or encourage students to use metacognitive strategies on their own without sounding condescending? Sometimes I feel like when a student comes in and we give them a strategy or a suggestion, right? If they're a little bit more defensive, we have to be careful with our tone. So how could we suggest a metacognitive strategy without making them feel defensive or without them feel like we're talking down to them?
You can kind of just say like that you relate to it, like, are in a sense where, oh, I do this to help me.
Right.
Like, that's what I mean.
Absolutely. Like connect the peer part of it, right? That you're a student also. So maybe mention what you do or mention that a friend, if it's not something you actually do, maybe say like, oh, my classmate or my friend does this. Yes, absolutely, Samantha. Sharing your own experiences where you've used metacognition. Get that peer-to-peer connection there. I'm going to skip down. How could we use Socratic questioning in employing some of these strategies? So metacognitive strategies or helping them develop a growth mindset. Where could the Socratic questioning come in for that? It might have been a while since you've talked about Socratic questioning. So those are those WH questions, right? Not asking yes, no questions, but asking more like how, what, why questions. How could that connect with using metacognitive strategies? I don't think there's wrong answers. Just what do you think? Okay, so Cassandra says ask what they are interested in, how they feel about something, what they want to do. Okay, yeah.
If questions aren't yes or no, it's less of a black or white area, showing that there's like, scales of gray, which is a type of progress from a fixed to a growth mindset.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. And Daniel also says not just asking why, but how they were able to think it through. Yeah, absolutely. Getting down to the process, getting them to share the process, right? Because that is a metacognitive strategy. The last question I have for you before we go to lunch is how might a student's place on Bloom's taxonomy impact our use of metacognitive strategies or even which Socratic questions we use? So I'm going to go ahead and exit and reshare my screen back to the beginning of the PowerPoint so that you have the Bloom's taxonomy up there for you. So again, the question that I am asking is, how might a student's place on this, right, which level they are in, impact either like what metacognitive strategies we use or what Socratic questions we use with them? What are your thoughts there?
Like the students that are on the remembering level are really struggling, usually, if it's a math thing. So I'm very careful with them, but the majority of the students I work with are in the understanding and sort of applying, but mostly just understanding level.
I know it may be difficult to see. So with that, Samantha, how is it different if you've got a student in the remembering phase? What strategies do you use in a session with them versus what you would do with a student that's in the understanding phase?
With the remembering phase, I basically just use leading questions because I want them to get these like concrete answers, but I don't want to tell it to them. I want them to feel more independent and confident in what they're doing.
Okay, yeah. So you might be having to ask more leading questions. You might be asking them more questions, or you might be taking a question and breaking it down into smaller parts so that they don't feel overwhelmed. Absolutely. Anybody else? How could this connect to either the Socratic questioning or the metacognitive strategies we might suggest? I don't see anything coming through. So I'm going to kind of flip what Samantha was talking about. What would happen if we had a student who was maybe in the applying stage, but they're just being proactive and coming in for tutoring, right? Like they're able to kind of do some of the stuff in the class. So they're just coming in to get a little bit of help before the test, make sure they're in the right place. What would happen if you approached them as if they were in the remembering stage? What would maybe happen in a session if we treated them like they were in the remembering stage? Or how would you feel, I guess, is a way to ask that, if somebody was treating you like you were in the remembering stage when you were actually further in your understanding of the content. Okay, Cassandra says she doesn't think a student would get much out of that session. Okay, so they might leave kind of frustrated and be like, yeah, I didn't learn anything, they didn't help me.
I don't think they would continue to value our input as tutors, so they maybe wouldn't come back.
Right. So it could impact their decision to come back. It could impact their view of the session. And it could impact their decision to come back if they do kind of fall down to the understanding or remembering stage for a different concept in the course. So it's very important for us to kind of think about, as we're going through things, where are they at on this, right? We can use the Socratic questions to guide us with that. Okay, they answered this quickly, they covered that really fast. You can maybe ask a more advanced question like a why or a how question before you continue. You might be suggesting metacognitive strategies that require them to do more if they're a little bit more advanced. Okay, we're a little bit over time, just by a minute. It is now lunchtime for you, so you can go do what you'd like. We're going to come back together at 12:10. The link for that is available in the general channel, but if you just get back to the general channel on Teams, you'll see the call going when you come back. And we're going to actually be talking about peer mentoring a little bit more. So hopefully you'll be able to get something out of that since you are level 3s. Yeah. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next sessions.